1, 2. Evening, everyone. Evening. Do all of us have a copy of the handout? Do we all have a copy? If not, just in Adele, would you mind just bringing some of those copies? And then secondly, we will get to this part, but if you haven't had the chance to complete the list, to check the list on the first page, I have a pen here for each one of us. So you don't have to do it yet. I'll give you some time to do that. Who needs a pen? Anyone? No? Okay. Hey? You can do it on his behalf, yeah? Yeah. Bernice might tick everything, eh? Okay. 2 different times. Okay. Evening, everyone. Can we go? Ojal? Thank you. Welcome. Thanks very much for gathering together during this Lenten period and joining me along this journey of codependency. I don't know if it's a good thing that we're doing it together, because it's about codependency. But yeah, let's just offer our time to God. Well, thank you again for the gift of Lent, which allows us in the midst of our own busyness to retreat into you, Lord. And so help us, Lord, in this journey as we focus over the next couple of weeks around the area of codependency, to have some kind of understanding of it, to notice it within us and around us, and to allow your Spirit to slowly begin its work, His work of healing us through it and out of it. So help us to admit that we cannot do this, Lord, without you, and that we need your help. And so, Holy Spirit, we invite you to just move among us this evening. Speak into areas of our lives that we might have closed off or hidden for a while. And as you open up, Lord, those areas, we know that you would also provide a way out of drawing others closer to us that can journey with us. And so speak, Lord. Your servants are listening. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. I am the Lord that healeth thee. I am the Lord that healeth thee. I am the Lord that healeth thee. In thee, O Lord, do I put my trust. In thee, O Lord, do I put my trust. In thee, O Lord, do I put my trust. Okay, thank you. Again, welcome everyone. Again, just a reminder, each one of us should have one of these sheets. If you don't have a pen, just indicate, and then I can ensure that the pen comes your way. We're going to start off with the checklist first. And so the invitation here is to check the statements from the following list that fit your life. We'll start there first. And it's really just an honest reflection. So don't worry about the person next to you or behind you. This is for oneself. And I'll do it with you as well. And so I'll give you a couple of minutes. The first one, I can't stand to be alone. So that is, if you can't stand to be alone, then you check that. Okay. So if it applies to you, you check, do a tick next to it. I can't stand to be alone. Second one, I am a perfectionist. I am a perfectionist. Thirdly, I am driven by the approval of others. I'm driven by the approval of others. I feel desperate when I cannot gain the approval of others. I feel desperate when I cannot gain the approval of others. I find myself making decisions based on how they will affect other people and rarely consider myself. Many times I am obsessed by a need for total order in my life. Many times I am obsessed by the need for total order in my life. You might think, okay, I'm not obsessed, but I just need total order. I put work first above anything. I put work first above anything. I find myself adjusting to my spouse's needs rather than communicating my feelings. I find myself adjusting to my spouse's needs rather than communicating my feelings. I do not experience anger. Doesn't mean that you don't get angry, it just you don't express your anger. So I do not experience anger. I overeat often. I overeat often. I can see you looking at me waiting to make a tick there. Yeah. I'm constantly wondering what other people think of me. I'm constantly wondering what other people think of me. I cover up my feelings so others won't realize what I really think. I cover up my feelings. I am afraid that if others really knew me, they would run and hide. I'm afraid that if others really knew me, they would run and hide. I am constantly trying to figure out how to stay ahead in my relationships. I cover up my feeling of self-doubt with drug or alcohol or any other substance. Or it can be substance, can be food, can be a number of other things. It's making reference to addictions here. I guess can be work as well. I can't say no when I'm asked to do a favor or serve on a committee. I can't say no. When I begin to feel angry, I go shopping, work harder, eat more, whatever it is. What happens? I tell myself I shouldn't hurt so much. I tell myself it shouldn't hurt so much when others let me down. 19, I need to control those close to me. I need to control those close to me. I need everyone to be happy with me so that I can feel good about myself. I need everyone to be happy with me so that I can feel good about myself. And then lastly, I need others to be strong for me without requiring anything from me in return. I need others to be strong for me without requiring anything from me in return. It says there, you can see there's 21 of them. I guess you can probably add others to it as well. But it says there just below that, it says, if you checked 2 or more, if you've checked 2 or more, it doesn't say if you've checked 10 or more. If you've checked 2 or more of the preceding statements, it says you have some codependent issues that are worth looking at. If you've checked 2 or more of the preceding statements, you have some codependent issues that are worth looking at. Okay, I have checked 2 or more. Am I going to put you on the spot if I ask you? I'm just kidding, I'm not going to do that. Okay. What's going to happen tonight? This evening, we're really just going to be kind of clarifying a bit more in terms of what codependency is and getting a glimpse into that, especially through the book, Love is a Choice. And so we'll start a bit with the scripture reading, and I'll be jumping a bit in terms of Genesis as we follow Jacob's journey and that of Joseph. So just a couple of scriptures around that, and I'd like you to wear the lens of codependency. Wear the lens of codependency as you begin to notice the story as well. And that from there, we'll go back into what are some of the traits of codependency. And then I'll link that trait with a book called Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. Peter Scazzero, he makes mention of a couple of areas of our life that needs working on as disciples, especially that of, he makes mention of the fact of immaturity. And so as if to basically say, yes, we can be disciples, but we can still be very much immature in our relationship with others as well. And so we'll highlight some of that. And then I'll give you a bit of a case study so that you can notice the thread of codependency as well. I'm hoping you'll be able to pick up all of those things, okay? And so I'm hoping to end by 8 o'clock. I'm mindful of the load shedding. Many of us had to drive back into the darkness. So the issue of safety. So this evening we won't go into groups, but there will be a space maybe just if there are any questions for that we might have or any comments at the end. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, thank you. For those of us who have our Bibles with us, I invite you to turn to Genesis. Chapter 25. Genesis chapter 25. If you don't have a Bible, there's some in the foyer as well, but I don't even know if you're going to be able to see. Chapter 25, and I read from verse 23. This God is speaking to Rebekah. This is the wife of Isaac. So Abraham, Isaac, and Rebekah is Isaac's wife. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. And when the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. And so they named him Esau. And after this his brother came out, with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob, which means he who grasps heel. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. So those who are 60 and plus, it's never too late, as you can see here. Hey? I invite you to skip to chapter 27 now. Chapter 27. So that's the account of their birth, and already you are introduced to some kind of, I guess, conflict situation. Be mindful of the fact that the context also is that Isaac has a responsibility during that time to look after who is his heir, which will be the eldest, and therefore you would have greater favor upon the eldest child than on the youngest child. Esau is also, he's more set in terms of his body, he's hairier, he's out in the field, he's working compared to Jacob. So it looks like Esau is daddy's boy, and it seems like Jacob is mommy's boy. Immediately we kind of see this kind of connections, maybe in our own relationships as well. Chapter 27, when Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son, here I am." He answered, Isaac said, "I am now old, an old man, and don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your weapons, your quiver and bow, and go out to the country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I'd like to bring in it to me and eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." And so Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. And when Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, 'Bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat, so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die.' Now, my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, so that I can prepare some tasty food for your father, just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat, so that he may give you his blessing before he dies." And we are familiar with what happens after that. Rebekah then uses Jacob to trick Isaac into Jacob getting his father's blessing. And after he gets his blessing, what then happens? Anyone? Remember? Sorry? Esau comes back, and then Jacob has to flee. Jacob has to flee. Verse 41. Just wanting you to follow the storyline. Verse 41, chapter 27. Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." And when Rebekah was told what his older son Esau had said, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, "Your brother Esau is consoling himself with the thought of killing you. Now then, my son, do what I say. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides. And when your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him, I will send word for you to come back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Okay, what are we being introduced here? Well, besides the importance of saving your life, is an invitation of not necessarily having to deal with the issue. And you begin to run away from the issue. Well, what could be the issue here? What was the relationship between Isaac and Jacob? Was there much of a relationship? Was there preference for Esau over Jacob? And for a moment, just think about what that could create within Jacob and within Esau. I want you to just notice then the story of the prodigal son, how Jesus tells it. He highlights not the older son, but the younger son. Just the way God sees things a bit differently. And notice some of these struggles. Jacob is a trickster. And off he goes to his uncle. He meets Rachel, and he wants to marry Rachel. His uncle says to him, you can have Rachel, but there's an older sister, Leah. And the uncle's thinking, there's no way I can give you this one, because that one's not going to get married, so I will trick you into getting both. I wonder if that's a kind of genetic line within the family for a moment. This trickster returns to the one who tricks him. He has no other family other than the ones there. He's tricked into being with Laban for 14 years. And eventually then makes his way back. What does he do? He tricks Laban again. It's back and forth kind of scenario. And he tricks him, Laban runs after him, but he makes his way back. And so now this is a scenario that he faces. He now needs to get back home and face who? His brother. And so this is how many years later he's still filled with fear, thinking that Esau is probably going to kill him. And so what does he do? He separates his tribe. One half goes in one direction so that there will be a survival in terms of his own name. And the other goes out to meet Esau. And just before they meet Esau, Jacob has this dream. He sees the staircase into heaven. And then he has this, that's on his way to heaven. Coming back, he has a wrestle with God. He wrestles with God. God puts his hip out. What was the wrestling? He had to face his brother. And when he meets his brother says, Jacob, what's the big deal? How do we not sit many times with all of those kind of things within us, and we create the narrative? And when we have to face the situation, it's not as bad as what we first perceived it. Because we're still harping on something that has affected us many years ago. I'm sure we sit here with lots of worries, concerns, decisions we have to make about something that's still affecting us today. And then what happens? I'm going to ask you if you have the time, when you have the time to go further. Jacob has sons with Leah, and he has sons with Rachel. Before he has Benjamin, he has Joseph. Joseph is what? The younger son. So in one way, how did Isaac treat his younger son? How did he treat his younger son, which was Jacob? That's the older son. That was Esau. So the way Isaac treated his younger son, which was Jacob. How did Isaac treat Jacob? Yeah. He was ignoring him. He wasn't the favorite. You can be in a relationship in the home and still feel very much abandoned. There could be rejection as well. And so if you know the story of Joseph, Joseph is the youngest and is the favorite. Can you see how roles reverse? How Jacob now, having not been the favorite, takes on now that same situation and now makes his younger son the favorite, as if to say, what I went through, I don't want you to experience. And therefore, he goes the other direction and makes Joseph the favorite. What is the knock-on effect? His brothers who are older than him, in one way despises him because he's the favorite. And as he's being despised, eventually he lands up in a pit. There's anger. And the anger is not to Joseph. The anger is really to Jacob. My father ignored me. Why is my father so focused on him? Look at what I'm doing. And so what do you do when you're being ignored? You do more, and you do more, and you do more, and it's just never good enough. Until you begin to do what? Many times you begin to rebel, because maybe you will take notice of me if there's more of a rebellious nature in me. Now you have to pay attention. I'm just asking you to notice the knock-on effect. And so when Joseph eventually becomes governor of Egypt, he in turn can now take out his revenge on his brothers. But Joseph has a spiritual awakening experience. He realizes the importance of having to forgive and to bring family and to make them whole. So there is the possibility always of being healed from that which we've experienced in the past. Don't ever think that we can't be healed from it. You can. No matter what it is that you've gone through, you can be healed from it. Ojil, just put on the slide, please, man. Next one. Next one. And so what is codependency? Codependency is living with the myth that you can make yourself happy by trying to control people and events outside of yourself. Codependency is living the myth that you can make yourself happy by trying to control people and events outside of yourself. A sense of control, or the lack of it, is central to everything you do and think. Anyone tried controlling events and people outside of ourselves? Yeah? And so how's it been going for us? You tried with your children, yeah? And so what is this need for control within us? And that's what we're going to unpack a bit further. Next one. And so let's look at some definitions. And I know I've mentioned this before. Let's just go through it again. And I'm only going to give you two definitions, because the second one I also want to highlight. The first definition of codependency: a preoccupation and extreme dependence. A preoccupation and an extreme dependence, it says, emotionally, socially, and sometimes physically on a person or object. Extreme dependence. So you sometimes experience that kind of toxicity in a relationship. It's like you can't move. The person wants to know every single thing as to what you're going to do. Eventually, this dependence on another person becomes a pathological condition. It becomes an illness that affects the codependent in all other relationships. It has a knock-on effect. And so this may include all persons who are in a love or marriage relationship with in this instance, making reference, this is in the 1985, making reference to alcoholics, but all those in terms of substance abuse, in many other areas of codependency as well. Have one or more alcoholic parents or grandparents. grew up in an emotionally repressive family, it is a primary disease and a disease within every family, every member of an addictive. And so, for example, if you grew up in a family with an alcoholic, being maybe the parent, could be the mother, could be the father. As a young person, you have no control over that. As a child, you have no control over that, isn't it? And so what do? You do what you need to do to survive in those situations. And so what they've discovered, especially within AA, the minute someone enters the sobriety, they no longer, well, some of them may refer to the fact that they're still an alcoholic, but they're no longer indulging in alcohol. What's happened? The family have already formed their own mechanisms of survival with the family, with the alcoholic. Now the alcoholic is no longer an alcoholic. They're dry now. And now you think, what's happening now? Is something wrong? How do I deal with this person now? Because I'm so used to dealing with someone when they're drunk, when they're abusive, all of those kind of things. And so what you would find at times is that people would then break up because they're struggling to deal with the person who's had those symptoms. And so be mindful of the fact that who's the codependent? The alcoholic is the codependent. He's dependent on what? On the alcohol. The family are the codependents because they have to adapt to the relationship now with the alcoholic. Okay? Now that alcoholic you replace with a number of other things as well. Second one. Codependency is ill health, maladaptive or problematic behavior that is associated with living with, working with, or otherwise being close to a person with, in this instance, alcoholism, chemical dependence, or other chronic impairment. It affects not only individuals, but families, communities, businesses, and other institutions, even whole societies. Can you see the knock-on effect? It's not just in the home. That, in turn, goes out into the world, in the place of work. And so if you have people in positions of leadership in a country, and they have certain traits, you can imagine how do they make their decisions based on what influence in their life as well. Next one. And so this is from a book called, I just realized I was about to lift this up to you, but I don't think you can see it. The book is called Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. It's by Peter Scazzero. Moving from shallow Christianity to deep transformation. And this is what he says at the start of his book. This is traits of emotional, immature discipleship, he says. You can be a gifted speaker for God in public and be a detached spouse or an angry parent. You can be a gifted speaker for God in public and be a detached spouse or angry parent. You can function as a leader and yet be unteachable, insecure, and defensive. You can quote with the Bible with ease and still be unaware of your reactivity. You can fast and pray regularly and yet remain critical of others, justifying it as discernment. You can lead people for God when in reality your primary motive is an unhealthy need to be admired by others. You can be hurt by the unkind comment of a coworker and justify saying nothing because you avoid conflicts at all costs. You can serve tirelessly in multiple ministries and yet carry resentments because there is little personal time for healthy self-care. And you can lead a large ministry with little transparency, rarely sharing struggles and weaknesses. And I mean, these are not just things he's making up. He runs one of the largest churches out in America as well, but he speaks from this experience. So you can be a disciple and still be codependent and show a number of these traits of immaturity. Have you ever told someone that they're immature? Has anyone told you? And it's not a good feeling, isn't it? As if to kind of say, grow up. There's still stuff in you that needs to be dealt with. I think we all find ourselves in different levels with regards to that. Next one. I'm going to ask you to listen to this story. The way codependency works. And I'd like you to notice it. Bit of a lengthy one, just bear with me. He was a Depression-era kid, 7 years old in 1929, when the stocks took their fatal plunge. See, his old man said, never put faith in money, Jerry boy. His father, Bill Braley, didn't either. What Phil Braley earned was spent within 24 hours. Same with his wife, Maud. Phil was never actually out of work, as were so many of them. He remained fairly steadily employed as a delivery truck driver. Maud kept a little garden in her Los Angeles backyard and sometimes took in laundry. But no matter how much money she made, she never had any. Her wages disappeared as fast as Phil's. And from age 9 on, only son Jerry Braley was never without a paying job. Do you hear that? From the age 9 on. Only son Jerry Braley was never without a paying job. And one of his best paying jobs didn't last long. A covert cell of anarchists hired him to stuff political pamphlets under people's front doors after dark. The group was arrested and Jerry went on to more mundane jobs, sweeping floors, delivering papers and phone books, hawking oranges door to door. Whenever he passed the Western Auto Store, he'd check out bikes. At first he wanted the red Flyer with a mock tank on the crossbars and the pin striping on the fenders. And then he didn't care whether he had any extras. Eventually, he didn't care what color it was. He wanted a bike, any bike. He hungered. He yearned. And yet, for all the years he worked, he never accumulated enough money to buy a bike. His money always went to something the family needed when Dad was between paydays. In high school, Jerry was very competitive, excelled in athletics. At home, he excelled in keeping creditors at bay. The family shopped at 2 local grocery stores and had accounts past due at both. And Jerry would try one. If they refused to let him run up the bill further, he reshelved his purchases and, highly embarrassed, he tried the other store. His family never owned a house or phone. Jerry was so ashamed of their rentals that when he got a ride home from school, he'd get dropped off 2 blocks away. He painfully feared that someone would learn where he really lives. Now that's Jerry. Now we're introduced to Jill. Jill's family coped with the insecurity and tight money of the Depression in just the opposite way. Her father, too, managed to remain employed throughout the Depression, for he was a splendid carpenter. There the similarity ended. Phil Braley was laid back, easygoing, ever ready to lend you a buck if he had. Jill's father, Peter Winthrop, a tense and thundering rageaholic, hoarded every dime. And Jill's family, like Jerry's, did without, but not because of spendthrift ways, just the opposite. Money that should have gone for family needs went into the savings account instead. Belt tightening eased, and country moved into war and prosperity. Phil Brayley still never had a dime, and Peter Winthrop still hoarded every dime. Economic circumstances changed, and the two families didn't. Jerry grew into a handsome man, mature and poised. He was a little late in starting a family. Jill rose from the clerk to director of the Los Angeles County Public Safety Office, a born manager. Her superiors called her. And when Jill and Jerry met, it was love at first sight. Handsome bachelor, wedded dark, slim beauty. And as the years passed, Jerry amassed a chain of grocery stores and a major interest in a local bank. He's now worth in excess of $55 million. No Scrooge. He's an affable people lover who spends well and frequently. He knows where to put his charity dollars and whom to trust. He knows how to live well. Well, Jill changed, her friends say. She always had responded to fighting or problematic situations by tightening control and screaming a lot. Instead of mellowing, she just kept getting worse. A compulsive cleaner. She hollered whenever Jerry or their only child played. Bill was the child's name. Disturbed her tidiness by the mere act of living in the house. She criticized happy old Jerry every time he spent a dime, which was often. And her constant extreme dieting was starting to threaten her health. Eventually, Jill and Jerry came into the clinic. Can you see the chain of events? Are you able to notice this in your own life? My mother's father was in the army. And my mother tells me that he was an alcoholic. I was pretty young when he died. But as she grew up, he would instill fear in them because they knew eventually when he was at home, you needed to be at home a certain time. And you would never come home after him. You would make sure that you're in the house first before he arrives home. So immediately you see what? Sense of fear being instilled. When they spoke to him, their hands would be behind their back. And they made the reference of sir when they spoke with him. And if you had too much to drink and you angered him, I mean, hell has no fury, a kind of a scenario. And so you just never knew what to expect. And so that kind of fear gets passed down from one generation to the next. And you either say, I'll never want to be like my family member. And so if your family member is an alcoholic, you might say, I will never marry an alcoholic. Subconsciously, one sometimes takes someone whom you never thought would be an alcoholic, who is an alcoholic. I'm asking you to notice the threads here. Not of alcoholism, but of codependency. When my parents separated, I was young. And it's only recently that I began to start looking at these things. And so I was younger to older brothers, and my first response was to not share my feelings with my mother, because I thought immediately she's got her own problems. So what did I do? I suppressed my feelings. I'm not going to tell you how I feel. You don't need to know that. Let me just ensure that everything in the house is okay. So what did I do? I kept the peace. I tried my best to keep the peace. Make sure the request from my mother was met. Was the house swept before she came from work? Was the dishes done before she came from work? Even if it happened just a half an hour before she arrived. But you kept the peace. And then as you grow older, you think that it's okay not to share your feelings. And so what do you say? You're okay. So when I say to you, how are you doing? What's the first response? I'm fine. I'm fine. Now if I was fine, myself and Alzina, my wife, courted for 7 years. For 7 years. After 5 years, she kind of had to shake me, and she said to me, here's an ultimatum. You either marry me, or I move on. Which is rightly so. And you begin to notice how in certain situations, if I didn't get a kick from my behind to wake me up, I wouldn't have made the decision. You wanted to just keep the peace. Now these things begin to filter into your relationships. And so it's like extracting teeth from an ostrich if you want to speak, if I must speak about my feelings. It just doesn't happen. And so slowly as these things are opening up, recognizing one's own codependency, I'm asking you to begin to realize, what is it that God is doing? Instead of addressing and saying, I'm not codependent, what are the traits? Are you a perfectionist or not? And ask someone in the family to help you notice these things. And so what are the traits? Ojil, let's move on, please. Driven by one or more compulsions, as set out in the leaflet you have. Codependent is bound and tormented by the way things were in the dysfunctional family of origin. The codependent self-esteem and maturity frequently is very low. The codependent is certain his or her happiness hinges on others. These are traits that you would notice. The codependent feels inordinately responsible for others. Next. The codependent's relationship with a spouse or significant other person is marred by a damaging, unstable lack of balance between dependence and interdependence. We'll deal a bit with that in the next couple of weeks. The codependent is a master of denial and repression. The codependent worries about things he or she cannot change and may well keep on trying to change them. Isn't that so tiring? Trying to change things that we cannot change and yet we still keep on doing it? Or maybe we should put the word there, instead of change the things, change him or her. The codependent's life is punctuated by extremes. It's polarized extremes. Extremely happy, everyone needs to go with it, or extremely angry, everyone needs to hide. And the codependent is continually looking for something that is missing in their life. And so I want you to notice these areas of true life. The next one, Ojil. The real self and the codependent self. Charles Whitfield, in his book called Healing the Child Within, highlights these areas. The real self is authentic self. The codependent self is unauthentic self and wears a mask. The real self, the true self, and the false self, the persona. The real self is genuine and the codependent self is ungenuine, as if personality. The real self is spontaneous, and the codependent self plans and plods. It's about control, is it not? Nothing wrong with planning. That's not the issue that they're trying to identify here. The real self is expansive and loving, while the codependent self is contracting and fearful. I just give you enough of myself. The real self is giving and communicating. The codependent withholds. The real self is accepting to self and others, and the codependent self is envious, critical, idealized, and a perfectionist. Next slide. The real self is compassionate, other-orientated. The codependent self is overly conforming. The real self loves unconditionally, and codependent loves conditionally. There's conditions set by that love. The real self feels feelings, including appropriate, spontaneous, current anger. And the codependent denies or hides feelings, including long-held anger, resentment. The real self is assertive, and the codependent is aggressive or passive. You've heard the word passive-aggressive. The real self is intuitive, rational, logical child, the child within, the inner child. The codependent is overdeveloped, this overdeveloped parent-adult scripts. The real self ability to be childlike. The codependent self is childish. There's a difference. The real self needs to play and have fun. The codependent avoids play and fun. The real self is powerful in a true sense, and the codependent limited power. The real self is trusting while the other is distrusting. Move on. The real self enjoys being nurtured, and the other avoids being nurtured. Surrenders, and the other controls and withdraws. Self-indulgent, and the other is self-righteous. Open to the unconscious, while the codependent blocks unconscious material. There's a hesitancy, again, of wanting to grow, wanting to see what's come out of our past. The real self remembers our oneness, and the codependent forgets our oneness, feels separate. The real self is free to grow, and the codependent tends to act out unconscious, often painful patterns repeatedly. And the real self is the private self, while the codependent is the public self. And so I just want to read from you from the book called Healing the Child Within, what Charles Whitfield says. He says, our real self is spontaneous, expansive, loving, giving, and communicating. Our true self accepts ourselves and others. It feels, whether the feelings may be joyful or painful, and it expresses those feelings. Our real self accepts our feelings without judgment and fear, and allows them to exist as a valid way of assessing and appreciating life's events. Our child within is expressive, assertive, and creative. It can be childlike in the highest, most mature and evolved sense of the word. It needs to play and have fun, and yet is vulnerable, opening and trusting. It surrenders itself to others and ultimately to God. And yet it is powerful in the true sense of power. Our child within flows naturally from the time we were born to the time that we died, during all of our times and transitions in between. We don't have to do anything to be our true self. You don't have to do anything to be our true self. It just is. If we simply let it be, it will express itself with no particular effort on our part. While the false self feels uncomfortable, strained, and unauthentic. The false self is a cover-up. It contracts and fearful. It's egocentric ego and superego, forever planning and plotting, continually selfish. The full self appears to be universal among humans. It has been described or referred to countless times to print and in our daily lives. It has been called such diverse names as a survival tool, psychopathology, and egocentric ego, and the impaired or defensive self. The full self can be destructive to self and others, and intimate relationships. And so what's the journey for us is kind of noticing the full self and the true self. I'm going to ask you to spend 2 minutes. Just find someone quickly. And just for 2 minutes, are you able to relate to what has been said? Are you able to see yourself? You don't need to point out which areas and whatever else, but what speaks to you this evening around the area of codependency? Just 2 minutes quickly. Just where you are. In twos or threes, it doesn't really matter. Okay, 20 seconds. Okay, is there anything that stands out? Anyone wants to make a comment or have a question? Maybe something that was raised? Anyone? Going once? Sorry? Okay, thank you. Then I think what I would find it helpful, if you do have any questions, please mail me, email me or send a message. Then one can respond to those questions. I won't make mention as to who it's from. But sometimes a question raises a number of questions that others might have as well. So that'd be the one thing. What we want to look at next week is the whole area of unmet emotional needs. I'm just looking for the little page. Here we go. So what we want to look at is how the codependency then kind of filters in this unmet needs. I want to give you an example. One of the areas that make mention here, these doctors, is that of tanks. Imagine the fact that we have a tank, and that each child is born with a tank, a love tank. And so in a healthy relationship, whatever that looks like in our families nowadays, it is the parents' role to deposit into the tank of the children. Okay? When there's brokenness and there's dysfunctionality in the family, parents begin to withdraw from the child's tank. So they take from the tank. And so as we grow as adults, there's always a longing to somehow fill the tank with something. Many times our parents didn't do it intentionally. It's what they needed to do at that time. Not that it was right, but it drew a lot from us. And so today we still sit with this void, this emptiness, filling it with a number of stuff. So we'll explore a bit more of that. And then as we enter into those kind of deeper spaces, the opportunity will be there for prayer. This is also an opportunity for God to work, to bring to the surface some of the things that it needs to bring, and for us to experience healing from it. Only spiritual change can bring about the change that is necessary. And so I want to end off with a poem. Ojo, please hear what I am not saying. Please hear what I'm not saying. And I'll make that available to you. Do not be fooled by me. Don't be fooled by the face I wear, for I wear a mask, 1,000 masks. Masks that I'm afraid to take off, and none of them is me. Pretending is an art that's second nature with me, but don't be fooled. For God's sake, don't be fooled. I give you the impression that I'm secure, that all is sunny and unrough, led with me, within as well as without. That confidence is my name and coolness is my game. That the water's calm and I'm in command, and that I need no one. But don't believe me. My surface may seem smooth, but my surface is my mask, ever varying and ever concealing. Beneath lies no complacence. Beneath lies confusion and fear and aloneness. But I hide this. I don't want anybody to know it. I panic at the thought of my weakness and fear being exposed. That's why I frantically create a mask to hide behind. a nonchalant, sophisticated facade to help me pretend, to shield me from the glance that knows, but such a glance is precisely my salvation, only hope, and I know it. That is, if it's followed by acceptance, if it's followed by love, if the only thing that can liberate me from myself, from my own self-built prison walls, from the barriers I so painstakingly erect, it's the only thing that will assure me of what I can't assure myself, that I'm really worth something. But I don't tell you this. I don't dare. I'm afraid to. I'm afraid that your glance will not be followed by acceptance, will not be followed by love. I'm afraid that you think less of me, that you laugh and your laugh would kill me. I'm afraid that deep down I'm nothing, that I'm just no good, and that you will see this and reject me. And so I play my game, my desperate pretending game, with a facade of assurance without and a trembling child within. And so begins the glittering but empty parade of masks, and my life becomes a front. I idly chatted to you in this wave of tones of surface talk. I tell you everything that's really nothing, and nothing of what's everything, of what's crying within me. So when I'm going through my routine, I do not be footed by what I'm saying. I don't know if that's supposed to be fooled. But please listen carefully and try to hear what I'm not saying. What I'd like to be able to say, what for survival I need to say, but what I can't say. I don't like to hide. I don't like to play superficial, phony games. I want to stop playing them. I want to be genuine and spontaneous and me. But you've got to help me. You've got to hold out your hand, and even when that's the last thing I seem to want, only you can wipe away from my eyes the blank stare of the breathing dead. Only you can call me into aliveness. Each time you're kind and gentle and encouraging, each time you're trying to understand because you really care, my heart begins to grow wings, very small wings. Very feeble wings, but wings. And with your power to touch me into feeling, you can breathe life into me. I want you to know that. I want you to know how important you are to me. How you can be a creator, an honest to God creator of the person that is me if you choose to. And so you alone can break down the wall behind which I tremble. You alone can remove the mask. You alone can release me from my shadow world of panic and uncertainty. From my lonely prison, if you choose to. Please, please choose to. Do not pass me by. It will not be easy for you. A long conviction of worthlessness builds strong walls. The nearer you approach me, the blinder I may strike back. It's irrational, but despite what the books say about man, often I am irrational. I fight against the very thing that I cry out for. But I'm told that love is stronger than strong walls, and in this lies my hope. Please try to beat down those walls with firm hands, but with gentle hands, for a child is very sensitive. Who am I, you may wonder? I am someone you know very well, for I am every man you meet, and I am every woman you meet. And so we need one another. So let us pray. So Lord, only you can take us deeper. Into those spaces and areas of our lives that we are reluctant to want to go into. For within those areas lies the true us. I pray, Lord, that you would send those around us, that we can be honest and open with, that there's a willingness to journey and to work at slowly coming out of these areas of codependency. And so when that codependency chooses not to want to be healed, give me the courage to fight against it. For deep within me, I know lies that image which is you. So thank you for everyone being with us this evening, Lord. And I pray for a deeper journey as we begin to open up into those areas that will be painful. But we know that we are not journeying through this alone, that you are with us. In Jesus' name. Amen. I'm going to ask you to please consider and pray into this, if you don't have someone already, to find someone in your life during this period. Someone whom you can be honest with, someone that you can be open with, but someone who will be honest with you and open with you as well. That you can just share with them some of those deepest feelings. And so this requires work. And I'm asking you to be intentional about working at it. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Safe travels. Mary? Yes, I'll make it available. I'll put it on the chat, and then also I'll make some prints for next week. Okay.